In this video, we'll be taking a look at 9 NFL players participating in Week 17 games and providing you with a free player prop pick for each one of those players. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released so that you have more time to plan out your bets. One more thing before we start, if you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. R.J. Harvey of the Denver Broncos. Since J.K. Dobbins went down with a season-ending injury in Week 10, Denver's backfield has had a clear pecking order, and Harvey is sitting firmly at the top of it. Over the last 5 games, he has handled 67 of the 94 rushing attempts that have gone to the running backs, which is the kind of workload coaches usually reserve for a true featured guy. That run-heavy role also shows up where it matters most, with 16 of 20 red zone rushing attempts and 5 of the 6 goal line carries going his way. So when Denver gets near the stripe, the ball is almost always in his hands. If you have ever sweated a rushing prop or a fantasy matchup, you know how comforting that sort of steady volume can feel, even if it still makes you a little nervous on Sunday. This past weekend, Kansas City allowed Tony Pollard and Tyjae Spears to combine for 154 rushing yards on 34 attempts, which works out to 4.53 yards per carry and paints the picture of a run defense springing leaks. That level of production suggests Harvey should have plenty of room to operate on the ground against a Kansas City team that looks like it is in full tank mode right now. Honestly, when you put his recent usage next to how soft they just looked against the run, it all points toward another heavy Harvey rushing day. Over 48.5 rushing yards is our R.J. Harvey player prop pick. David Montgomery of the Detroit Lions. Last Sunday really felt like rock bottom for David Montgomery and the Lions' run game. He logged only 13 snaps and touched the ball just 4 times, which is the kind of usage you usually see for a backup getting cardio, not a key veteran in a physical offense. That light workload has not been a one-week blip either. It has been the pattern for about a month and a half now. Across his last 6 games, Montgomery has carried the ball fewer than 9 times in every single one, and that stretch has lined up with 4 Lions losses and the sting of missing the playoffs after last season's historic regular season. If you have watched Detroit lately, you can feel how different the offense looks when their power element basically goes missing. Looking ahead to Christmas Day, the expectation here is pretty simple. We are assuming the Lions get back to their old 1-2 punch approach in a spot where they are touchdown favorites on the road, which is usually the kind of game where coaches lean into what has worked in the past, rather than experimenting too much. It is not hard to imagine a game plan that leans on Montgomery early to settle things down, then lets the flashier pieces pile on once the Vikings are on their heels. We are still waiting for more of the major books to hang their Montgomery numbers, including a full menu of rushing attempts. However, BetMGM has already posted his rushing attempts line at 8.5, which strongly hints they expect a much bigger workload than what we have seen lately. That number, by itself, practically tells you the market is bracing for a usage correction. Since Montgomery moved from Chicago to Detroit, it has been pretty clear that when he gets meaningful work, the Lions' offense tends to flow naturally. With 11 or more touches for Montgomery, the Lions are 26-8. When he gets fewer than 7 touches, that flips hard to a 2-5 record, including the ugly loss last week. Here is the thing, coaches see those splits too, even if they never mention them at the podium. The projected game script also leans heavily toward Detroit. With the Vikings having Max Brosner under center, it sets up as the kind of matchup where the Lions can play from ahead, keep things on schedule, and feed a fresh Montgomery into a defense that has to respect the pass but is stuck chasing the scoreboard. In that kind of spot, it is easy to picture him clearing his rushing line with some room to spare. Over 31.5 rushing yards is our David Montgomery player prop pick. Troy Franklin of the Denver Broncos. Franklin put together a big outing against Kansas City in Week 11, leading his team in receiving with 4 catches on 8 targets for 84 yards. That kind of volume tells you the quarterback is comfortable looking his way, even when things are a little hectic in the pocket. For a rookie trying to carve out a role, that trust might matter just as much as the box score. The former Oregon standout has stayed productive lately too, with 85 and 66 yards in his last 2 games. So this is not some random one-week spike. It looks more like a steady climb in involvement and confidence. Honestly, that is the pattern you like to see when you are backing a young receiver on a short week, not just one fluky busted coverage. He now matches up with a Chiefs defense that is surrendering 7.2 yards per pass attempt, which is the 10th most in the NFL. That number quietly hints that you can attack them through the air, especially if you are willing to push the ball beyond the sticks. It is not that they are a disaster, but they are clearly giving up more chunk plays than a true top-tier pass defense. With Pat Bryant likely out after the scary concussion he suffered last weekend, there is a clear need for someone to absorb extra targets on Thursday. Both Franklin and Sutton will have to carry even more of the pass-catching workload, and Franklin's recent usage suggests he is not just out there getting cardio. Let me explain. When a coaching staff already leans on you in key spots, then loses another receiver, the path to volume usually widens rather than shrinks. That is exactly the kind of setup that can turn a solid roll into a very fantasy and prop-friendly night. Over 39.5 receiving yards is our Troy Franklin player prop pick. Dak Prescott of the Dallas Cowboys. These two defenses are absolutely brutal against the pass. They have been torched through the air so often that you kind of expect fireworks every time they share a field. In their first head-to-head meeting this season, the two teams combined for 66 points. Something similar could easily happen on Thursday, with both offenses likely taking to the air early and often instead of pretending this will be some grinded-out slugfest. Nobody across the league is giving up more yards per pass attempt than Washington right now, sitting at 8.3 yards per throw, and that is a number that screams big play potential every time a quarterback drops back. Prescott threw for what looks like a modest 264 yards when the Cowboys hammered the Commanders 44-22 in October. But that game got so lopsided that he only needed 30 pass attempts, and he completed 21 of them, then more or less put his feet up once the scoreboard got out of hand. If this one plays out in a more competitive way, the expectation is that his volume climbs, which gives those yards more room to stack up. Honestly, both of these teams are out of the playoff picture, so there is not much incentive to play tight or conservative. They might as well cut it loose and air it out regardless of what the scoreboard says, which is usually how you end up with a fast game and a busy box score for the quarterback. The Mississippi State product has thrown for at least 294 yards in 4 of his last 5 games. That stretch even includes 3 performances with 320 yards or more, which shows this recent production is not some random hot quarter. It is a real pattern of heavy passing and big yardage. When you put that recent form next to how soft these secondaries have looked, it is not hard to imagine another strong passing day. Over 273.5 passing yards is our Dak Prescott player prop pick. Terry McLaurin of the Washington Commanders. Washington's offense should be in on the fun too. Even though Dallas has improved defensively after its trade deadline additions, they are still a mess against the pass. Right now the Cowboys sit dead last in passing defense at 257.8 yards allowed per game, and they are second to last in yards per pass attempt allowed at 8.2, better than only Washington. Those numbers basically invite any opponent to throw, especially in a game where both teams have every reason to lean into what they do best through the air. The home team is set up to take advantage on Thursday no matter who is at quarterback. Marcus Mariota, dealing with hand and quad issues, is listed as questionable, and if he cannot go it would be Josh Johnson stepping in. Neither of them is some superstar story waiting to happen, but both are veteran backups who have been around enough playbooks and locker rooms to function at a high level against a shaky secondary. Honestly, with how porous this Dallas back end has been, competent might be all you need. McLaurin profiles as a clear beneficiary of this matchup. The former Ohio State standout has hit at least 48 receiving yards in 7 of his last 8 games, and in 5 of those he has reached 53 or more. That is the kind of steady production that quietly builds trust, both from quarterbacks and from anyone holding a ticket on his props. He already showed his ceiling recently with 7 catches on 14 targets for 96 yards and a touchdown in a Week 13 loss to Denver, which is arguably the best defense in the league. So if he can post that kind of line against a top unit, it is not hard to imagine him doing plenty of damage against a struggling Dallas secondary. Over 48.5 receiving yards is our Terry McLaurin player prop pick. Jahmyr Gibbs of the Detroit Lions. U.S. Bank Stadium's controlled environment really plays right into Gibbs's explosive style. No wind, no cold, just clean footing that lets him use that burst and lateral quickness without worrying about the field slowing him down. Minnesota's defense has struggled when facing versatile running backs who can stress them in both ways, attacking rushing lanes and leaking out into routes. When a back can threaten inside zone, outside runs, and angle routes in the same game, it forces linebackers to hesitate, and that tiny pause is all someone like Gibbs needs. Detroit's offensive coordinator keeps scheming touches for him in space, and you can see it in how often they motion him, flare him out, or give him screens designed to isolate him on slower defenders. His acceleration and vision turn those simple designs into real chunk play chances, and once he gets a crease, it feels like the defense is hanging on for dear life. The combined rushing and receiving yardage angle adds a nice bit of safety. If Minnesota sells out to stop the run, Gibbs can rack up yards as a receiver. If they sit back on the pass, Detroit can lean on his ground game, and either way, a strong performance in one phase can cover for a quieter day in the other. Over 108.5 rushing and receiving yards is our Jahmyr Gibbs player prop pick. Justin Jefferson of the Minnesota Vikings. This receiving yards number really sells Jefferson short compared to what he can put up in a typical week. He is Minnesota's unquestioned top target in the passing game, and he keeps seeing a high share of throws no matter who they are playing or what the situation is on the scoreboard. Honestly, when a receiver is treated as the first read that often, a line like this starts to look pretty soft. His routes are crisp, his timing with the quarterback is strong, and he wins in traffic often enough that even tight coverage does not shut him down. That combination keeps creating steady chances for yardage throughout the game, little chunks that quietly add up. On top of that, his ability to hit on big plays means this modest total can get wiped out on a single explosive catch if a defender slips or a tackle is missed. Detroit's secondary has taken a step forward, but it still allows enough passing production that a receiver of his caliber can go past this number without needing a perfect game. They can make things difficult at times, but they have not turned into the kind of unit that erases a true number one for 4 quarters. So when you stack his steady volume, his polished skill set, and his big play threat against this line, it looks more like a conservative projection than a real cap on his upside. Over 57.5 receiving yards is our Justin Jefferson player prop pick. Bo Nix of the Denver Broncos. Arrowhead Stadium is one of the toughest places for an offense to function cleanly, and that matters a lot for a young quarterback like Nix. The noise, the pressure, the constant sense that one mistake can snowball, it all adds up to a setting where passing rhythm is hard to find. Kansas City's defensive scheme is built to choke off big passing plays. They mix coverage well, keep safeties in smart spots, and pair it with a steady pass rush that forces quarterbacks to speed up their process. When you are facing that kind of front and coverage together, it usually means more checkdowns, more throwaways, and fewer explosive gains that pad yardage totals. The depth in the Chiefs' secondary and the presence of seasoned veterans on the back end create even more issues for anyone trying to settle into a groove. They disguise things, pass routes off smoothly, and make it tough for quarterbacks to lock into a rhythm drive after drive. On top of that, the expected game flow leans toward Kansas City controlling the tempo. If they are ahead and dictating pace, Denver will likely see fewer total possessions. That kind of script often leads to tricky down and distance spots for the passing game, with Nix forced into obvious passing situations rather than comfortable, balanced looks. Put together, it points toward a capped passing yardage outcome rather than a breakout air show. Under 236.5 passing yards is our Bo Nix player prop pick. Isaiah Pacheco of the Kansas City Chiefs. This rushing total feels extremely conservative for a starting running back in a favorable game environment. For a lead back like Pacheco, that number almost reads like it belongs to a part-time player instead of someone firmly in the game plan. Kansas City is expected to play from ahead, and that kind of script naturally opens the door for more rushing attempts as they try to control the pace in the second half. When a team is nursing a lead, coaches usually lean on the ground game to bleed the clock and keep things steady. That is exactly the type of scenario where carry counts creep up without needing anything fancy. Pacheco's physical running style pairs nicely with the Chiefs' zone blocking scheme, and his comfort in that system puts him in a strong spot against Denver's defensive front. He hits holes decisively, runs through contact, and turns routine plays into reliable gains, which is all you really need at this kind of number. The nice thing about a modest yardage requirement like this is that it does not demand highlight reel runs. Steady, consistent carries should be more than enough to clear the mark in a game where clock management becomes a priority and the coaching staff is content to let the ground game handle the heavy lifting. Over 34.5 rushing yards is our Isaiah Pacheco player prop pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed, subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.